Thanks for the warm introduction. It's nice to be back here. I was here a couple of weeks ago. You're leaving me? Alright, I see how it is. Thank you guys for having us once again. It's nice to be back. A lot of you are probably wondering why we're back. It's because of how important Colorado is in this election, and that's basically the biggest reason why we're here. I know a lot of you are wondering, or it's kind of unlikely that the three of us would come out and do something like this. I've certainly never done anything remotely like this before. I'm a registered independent, so I've voted for as many Democrats as Republicans as third-party candidates, depending on the election year and depending on what the issues were. Never thought that I would ever do anything like this, and the reason that I got involved, and I had the chance to share this story with a couple of you a few weeks ago, but the way that I got involved in the campaign actually goes back about 4 years ago. I was living down in Texas, and a buddy of mine had just graduated from high school. He was 19. Really wanted to go to college, and he wasn't able to afford it. So he was working this minimum wage job at a trucking company, and he was trying to save up. And his phone rang one day, and somebody from a company called Halliburton was on the other line. Do you remember Halliburton? You recognize that? Laughter, that's good. Okay, it's cathartic. Halliburton was Dick Cheney's old company, and they're involved in the Iraq War reconstruction. But Halliburton called my friend up and said that they would offer him $90,000 if he agreed to drive a truck in Iraq for them, for the private sector. And he called me up, and he called a few of our other friends up, and he said, what do you guys think we should do? Or what do you guys think I should do? And we talked about it for a while, and we said, look, this 90 grand obviously is going to pay for your undergrad education. It'll pay for grad school if you get in, and it could help you put a down payment on a small apartment. But what's the trade-off? You're not going into military service, you're going to drive a truck for a private contractor. And the more we talked about it, the more we looked at the issues, the more we realized that no matter what he decided to do, ultimately, this was a really sad thing, that the world's richest, most powerful country could only offer a buddy of ours two options if you wanted to go to college, either minimum wage or 90 grand in the middle of a war zone. So the side of me that was cynical and that was an independent got actually even more cynical, and 4 weeks after this, the 2004 Democratic National Convention was on TV. I had a couple of friends over, we were watching it. I was yelling at the screen half the time because I didn't agree with what some of them were saying. And a couple of my friends half of my friends are very conservative, the other half are pretty progressive. I guess I'm somewhere in the middle. And we were watching very intently when the keynote address started, and when this skinny guy with big ears walked on stage and started delivering one of the most eloquent speeches we had heard. And one line in particular kind of made us all look at each other. It was when Barack said, something to the effect of how there shouldn't be blue states and red states, we should focus on being the United States. And we kind of looked around and we thought, after September 11th, a lot of us felt like we wished that politicians, whether they were Democrats or Republicans, took a little more initiative in unifying the country instead of capitalizing on this blue state, red state nonsense. And so when he had said that, that captured our attention. By the end of his speech, we thought, all right, when is this guy going to run for president? So when he did, we looked at his record, we looked at his particular proposals for college students, a $4,000 tax credit for anyone who wants to go to school, raising the Pell Grant, for example, restructuring the privatized student loan system so that we're not all graduating in debt. And a few of us decided to sign up to volunteer. So I filled out a little index card that we're hoping you'll fill out. Put my name, email address, phone number, and I said I'd go knock on doors and make phone calls, and went up to Iowa for a couple of days. And I met all of the Obama volunteers who were there, and the majority of them were under 25. Now, if you've watched the same type of television that I do, maybe I just watch too much CNN, but this concept that our generation doesn't care, I don't necessarily think that's true. And I know that when we were in Iowa, they kept citing these statistics on TV. Did you know the average age of caucusing in Iowa in 2004 was 65 years of age? Like, okay, I guess that's like the biggest example you could come up with for calling us lazy. But on the flip side, we saw that all of these volunteers were under the age of 25, or at least under the age of 35, for all the campaigns, but particularly for Senator Obama's. And a lot of these folks convinced me to stay. So basically I moved to Iowa for about a month and a half before the primary election. And I have to always give the disclaimer that there was a writer's strike going on in California. So I had no job. So it really wasn't such a bad thing to do, being unemployed and all. But while we were in Iowa, here's the point of this story, is that we noticed two things happening. Right? So CNN and MSNBC and NTV and all these folks were running articles that questioned whether our generation cared, questioned whether or not we would come out. At the same time, they were running articles about my MySpace, Facebook, and YouTube. How many of you have seen a video on YouTube in the last, like, 3 days? Okay. Yeah, it's a little addictive. So YouTube is free to use, but because of how many of us use it and how frequently, they make $7.5 million a month in advertising revenue. We saw that, we whistled that way too, when we saw that statistic. The second two statistics were even more emphatic for us. We saw that MySpace was recently sold for just under $600 million to a company called News Corp, one of the world's largest media conglomerates. And Facebook was the starkest contrast to this notion that our generation had no power. Not yet with the whistle, it's coming up. Facebook was started by 3 college guys in their 20s up in Boston. These 3 guys are still in their 20s. Facebook was first valued at $1.6 billion and was most recently valued at $6 billion. Now you can. So we sat there, we thought, all right, hold on, you're telling us that we've made $6 billion in wealth for these companies just by sitting in front of our computers and tagging photos and messaging your friends, and that's it? And then waking up the next morning and quickly untagging the photos that you tagged. You'll do that tomorrow morning. But that made these people $6 billion. And so we're looking at these 2 conflicting stories and saying to ourselves, well, hang on a second, if we can make billions of dollars for our peers' companies by sitting in front of our computers, think about the power that we have to change the face of a presidential election. And not just one presidential election, but really the way in which politics operate in this country to begin with. And that's where you saw this whole movement for change start. That's where you saw